Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this new edition of Africa Today, where we get you the latest news and events taking place on the African scene. And we will start off with our major top stories and reports. According to the White House, President Joe Biden plans to announce that U.S.-Africa summit that his administration supports adding the African Union as a permanent member of the group of 20 nations. More details in this report.
U.S. President Joe Biden plans to announce at next U.S.-Africa summit that his administration supports adding the African Union as a permanent member of the group of 20 nations. The African Union represents the continent's 54 countries. The G20 is composed of the world's major industrial and emerging economies and represents more than 80% of the world's gross domestic product. South Africa is currently the only African member of the G20. Biden has invited 49 African leaders to take part in the three-day Washington summit that starts Tuesday. The G20 representations would allow African countries to more effectively press the group to implement its pledge to help the continent to cope with climate change. The high-profile push for inclusion in the G20 comes at a time when the AU has shown renewed unity and purpose on some high-profile issues, handing together to combat COVID-19 and establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area, which came into force in 2021.
And see with our special report, Egypt and the African Union are seeking to develop a unified vision for energy transformation. More details.
استقبل السيد الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي السيد باتريس كين رئيس مجلس إدارة شركة تالس الفرنسية، وذلك بحضور الفريق أحمد خالد.
Egypt and the African Union, AU, are seeking to develop a unified vision for energy transformation in the continent. Amania Bouzid, AU Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy, said that African countries should enhance cooperation, particularly in the field of energy, given the fundamental role of the sector in achieving stability and development. While asserting that oil and gas are important sources of energy for African countries that contribute to sustainable development, she noted the importance of transitioning to renewable energy sources as per a timetable that corresponds to the conditions and priorities of each country. The AU Commissioner urged developing a unified African strategy for energy transformation, underscoring the importance of supporting integration among African countries to secure energy sources through integrated systems. She added that these would contribute to opening new markets and exploring all available economic opportunities. Climate finance has been debated at very COP meetings since developing countries failed to meet their promises to mobilize $100 billion annually by 2020 to help developing nations with mitigation and adaptation measures. Africa produces no more than 3% of the world's total greenhouse gas emissions that cause global warming, according to experts.
Welcome back, dear viewers, and see with our special reports. Minister of Tourism and Antiquities, Ahmed Issa, reviewed his ministry's work and the most prominent axis of the national strategy for the development of tourism in Egypt, along with the push for more tourism to Egypt at rate of 25 to 30%. More details.
Minister of Tourism and Antiquities Ahmed Issa reviewed his ministry's work plan and the most prominent axis of the national strategy for the development of tourism in Egypt, along with the push for more tourism to Egypt of rate 25 to 30%. This came during a session of the 8th CEO's Thoughts 2022 conference on its second day, organized by the Ministry of Tourism. Issa said that these axes were identified based on what was studied during the last period, especially with regard to determinations that affect the supply side and face the tourism industry in Egypt. explaining that these access include working to provide greater access to the Egyptian tourist destination and doubling the capacity of aircraft in cooperation with the Ministry of Civil Aviation, improving the investment climate and encouraging tourism investments to increase hotel capacity and tourism transport fleets, in addition to working to improve the experience of tourists and raise the quality of services provided to them. The minister pointed out that work is being done on all axes of the strategy through formulation of various plans to be agreed upon and implemented in coordination with other relevant ministries, agencies, and institutions. With regard to the demand of the Egyptian tourism destination, the ministry reviewed the results of one of the marketing studies that were conducted during the previous period, explaining that it proved the presence of large numbers of potential tourists in the world for Egypt that could be attracted, and defined the potential tourists as those who have knowledge of the Egyptian tourist destination and desire in traveling to it, and that when they visit it, it is expected that their level of satisfaction with the tourist experience will be good.
Welcome back, and we're glad to be joined over the phone by Ambassador Souaid Chalabi, former assistant to the foreign minister. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Ambassador Souaid, the U.S. President Joe Biden is hosting leaders from across the African continent in Washington, D.C. on December 13th to 15th, 2022 for the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit. Now, would you please tell us more about the significance of this event?
This is a new initiative by President Biden that reflects on the new strategy of the United States towards Africa and towards including the African Union in its strategy towards the politics and economics of the United States. The United States have invited 49 African heads of state, including Egypt, Tunisia, Ethiopia, Senegal, South Africa, of course, and Nigeria. So the African Union Commission will be represented by Moussa Faki Mohammed, who is the chairman, and four countries will not be present because they are already suspended from the African Union. So the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit is receiving attention because of its unique meeting, the first meeting with President Biden, and all the diplomatic and political circles are very interested to see the outcome of this because it will have great repercussions on Africa and on the United States policy towards Africa.
Mm-hmm. U.S. said that the summit strives to achieve a common vision for the future of relations between the United States and the African continent. Now, how do you expect the future of relations between the two continents in light of this initiative?
As you know, that the big powers, Russia, China, have been and Japan have been annually inviting the African leaders for summits of that sort, for development, for strategic coordination, for trade. So the United States was lagging behind in this initiative. So this year, they are going to meet and revive all these relations. And one of the initiatives that the United States have made also was that the U.S. President has intentions to invite the African Union representative to the G20. Mm-hmm. Which is very important step towards the U.S.-Africa relations, and this is going to lead to have the support of United States for Africa's chances to obtain a seat in the United Nations Security Council,
Yes.
which we all are looking forward in Africa to have a seat, a permanent seat in the UN Security Council.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
yes. Well, do you agree that the summit is held at a critical time when international developments are imposing remarkable challenges on all world countries?
Yes, of course. It's very important. This time of that they chose for the summit is very critical because the world is witnessing a big war between Ukraine and Russia, and also there is a global insecurity in climate, in food security, in energy security. So the African countries are suffering from the impact of the global situation that is caused by the Ukrainian war, Ukrainian-Russian war. So the initiative that the U.S. is making to discuss with African countries how to get over these challenges and to pursue the different solutions to their problems. So Africa is getting together, and the United States will be there to increase investments, to increase trade, to have responsibility in the climate change, and also in the global food security problem.
In your opinion, how could the African continent benefit from such a summit and from this initiative?
I will quote a word said by the Senegalese president. He said, "We don't want anybody to impose on us any of the policies. We want to choose where to do, what to do, and what to do, and who to trade with." So if the summit is going to give the African leaders a chance to increase their investments, to increase their trade, that would be good for both for Africa and for the United States. The African Senegalese president said, "We don't want anybody to impose on us their policies."
Well, in the lead up to the three-day U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit that begins Tuesday, Biden administration officials played down their increasing concern about the clout of China and Russia in Africa, which is home to more than 1.3 billion people. What's your take on that?
Yes, of course. The investments of the United States lagging behind. And this is alarming that China is the one who is investing most in Africa. Of course, the United States can invest more, but because there are a lot of raw material and a lot of opportunities in Africa, China has rushed to invest more than any other country, any other big power. And Russia in 2019 has made also a big summit and included all the African countries. Egypt is present in this summit, and it's going to represent a lot of African fight in the challenges towards the climate change, because we have had the COP27, and we have represented Africa in creating a new fund for loss and damages, and this is mainly targeted towards African countries in order
Yes.
to have a lot of investments for projects that will save Africa from the climate change. So,
Right. Go ahead.
yeah. So what I want to say is that the American investments in Africa have to increase so that they become competitors to China and Russia and to Turkey and Japan and all other countries who have started a long time ago to invest in the African continent and in the rich raw materials, in the rich opportunities, economic and trade opportunities.
Yes. Well, I would like to thank you very much, Ambassador Saeed Shalaby, former Assistant to the Foreign Minister. Many thanks for your insight. And dear viewers, that brings us to the end of this edition of Africa Today. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more coming up here on Nile TV International.